search between the couch pillows that you can find a few coppers to pay the tax man. Welcome to Simplified Sparky Marketing. This podcast is going to be revolving around money. I think this is badly needed and badly wanted because a rising tide raises all the ships, or something along those lines, as the saying goes. So what's happened in the last 2 weeks is I have received a BAS bill for over 14,500. I think it's 14,600 that I have to pay for my BAS. And that's fine. That's cool. That's there. And not only that, I'm paying IAS as well. So that's an intermittent activity statement every month on my wages. So that BAS for 14 grand isn't including the IAS for 2 months as well. So how that works is usually every quarter people pay a BAS, electricians pay a BAS. So what happens with that is it is your GST and PAYG tax put aside that you have to pay back to the government. And what happens with IAS, I don't know why I had to do this. My accountant said I did, so I just believed them. And so what happens is every month I have got to pay the PAYG tax collected from my wages. I pay that the following month. So basically, I think it eradicates people pulling a sneaky and not having the money to pay the BAS at the end of the quarter, hence this podcast as well. And so that's fine. The money is there. It's put aside. And that's kind of the point of this podcast is when I quote, when I invoice, I want to make sure that I am running profitably. And I think that's one of the biggest things where people have a misconception of where the money goes that they actually take home. Like everything that you earn on a job, or if you make profit on a job, unless that money has gone somewhere or spent, that profit gets taxed. And that's where people kind of forget about these things. And that 10% you're collecting all along, that's not a buffer in your bank account. That's for GST to be paid back to the government. So that GST should be set aside, ready and waiting to pay back when the time comes, usually into the quarter. It may be the end of financial year permitting. What's happened last week was I was also in the same week beaten on an EV charger install pretty local to me. And it was a back-to-back-ish kind of Tesla wall connector. And I went in at about 2,700, I think. Maybe 2,500, something like that. Which is relatively cheap compared to what I used to charge until everybody watered down the market, unfortunately. And it happens, and it's happening. So that's not even the worst of the watering down. What happened was somebody came in and they quoted. I got a response back from the quote, and the guy said, somebody is doing it for 1,500. Can you match that kind of thing? So I looked at it and I was like, well, hang on. The charger is about $800, the Tesla charger. So that's $800. A 3-phase RCBO is going to be, if you use a Haggard, it's going to be about 160, 170 at cost with zero markup. You're going to be using a couple of meters of cable. That's going to be, let's just say, for instance, 10 meters, and let's just say it's $6 a meter. We're going to call that $60. So we're up to, what are we up to? 800 for the charger. We'll just say 1,000 for the charger and the breaker. We're up to 60 for the cable. We're not marking up anything yet. We have got an isolator, and that's going to be whatever, $40. We're up to like 1,100-ish. There's going to be other little sundries in there as well. And let's just say we're up at like 1,100 at cost, 1,150, 1,200. And super quick podcast interruption. Hope you're enjoying it. If you check out the show notes attached to this podcast, there are links to find me directly. If you want to work with me, I work with electrical business owners just like you, improving their electrical businesses. If you want a little bit extra to the podcast, there's also a short email series to improve your simplified Sparky marketing flywheel. Back to the podcast. And I don't even know if that 1,500 was inclusive of GST or excluding GST, which means it may well have been about 1,300 plus GST or 1,350 or whatnot. And I'm like, this is fucked. It's like this needs to get out there that I'm not a numbers guy. I'm not a fucking numbers guru. I am just smart enough to know you need to charge more than it costs you to run a business to make a profit. And I mean, what I mean by that as well is when you pay yourself a wage, there's tax on that. You've got to put that aside. When you make profit on the money you've got left over, there's going to be a tax on that. You need to put that aside. When there is there's all these little things that creep up with you. And this is why you need to really speak to your accountant and have a good long chat with them and understand your business of if I do this, will I get taxed on that? Because what I see, what's a very, very common thing is my quotation, for example, versus another electrician. Like take that person that drastically underquoted that job. Take my quote versus theirs. Mine might be, let's say, for instance, 30 or 40% more expensive than theirs. And the reason is I know that if I go in super tight on a job and I make profit, that profit is going to get taxed. Therefore, I charge a little bit more. So when it comes around, that means I can scrape my profit out, keep my profit, and at the same time, I can push that money that I've got for tax and put that aside as well. So that money is put aside and it's ready for that tax bill to come around. And when they go, you've got 14.5 grand to pay, I'm like, sweet. Pay out my credit card, get the points, transfer my business account back into the credit card account. Cost me a little bit of money, but it's worth it for the points in my opinion. But it's absolutely shocking out there of how uneducated guys are around what they need to charge for business, because you actually need to charge quite a bit or a very, very high hourly rate to cover the cost of business. And it's not really until you break it all down and you go like, okay, shit, in that $1,000, 100 of that is actually GST. The material in that is 500. Now I've got to pay, if you hypothetically had to pay staff and they were there for, 2 hours or an hour or 3 hours, depending what you pay them, the break even in those staff members might be $60, $70, $80 an hour. It could be $40 an hour, just depending what stage they're at. But just because you're paying them, let's say, for instance, $40 an hour, what it actually costs to run them is more like 60, 65, because they've got, basically they've got to work. They work about 10 months a year and you've got to pay them for 12 months of the year. So all these little things come into play. But if you're not making money in business and you're just battling and struggling, you're wondering what's going wrong, and you can't pay your tax bill, that's something very, very wrong. But where this all kind of circles back, and this is kind of why it's all tied into marketing, is usually this happens when you either A, you market the wrong clients, or B, you put zero effort into your attempts to look anyway professional, and that then leads to cheaper clients, or else you just go hunting in the wrong areas, as per the YouTube video a week or two ago. But I just said, this came into my thoughts last week. I was like, I need to say something about this. And what I'm hoping for is at least one of you electricians listening will learn from this and go, fuck, that's me. I need to put my hourly rate up, or I need to put money aside for tax. But what you need to charge is crazy compared to like what people think. And there's the whole construction thing of, if you're doing 8 hours, is 120 okay? 120 is nowhere near okay if you're doing service work. In my honest opinion, for service work in Sydney, you need to be at least $200, $300, even $400 an hour, depending how you feel, depending on your overheads. But I would be saying, as a service electrician in Sydney, you need to be at least 200. 200 is probably the cheapest side of service work. You need to be easily between 200 and 400. I know there's companies out there charging 500. And people think that's a rip, but it's all down to their business model. It's down to their business, their size, their staff, their equipment, their overheads, if they've got many vans, if they've got warehouses and stuff like that. It all has to get covered somehow, and that's usually in the hourly rate. And remembering that doing service work, you're only doing maybe 4, could be 3, 4, 5 hours a day of actual work. The rest might be bobbing in between jobs. It might be nipping to the suppliers to get stuff. You're not actually billable for the 8 hours usually. But it just opened my eyes in regards to that quote of coming in, that somebody was willing to do that job to make. I don't think they were even going to make money. I feel like they were going to break even, but I don't know what was going on or why they were doing that so cheap. Undoubtedly, it would have been a cheap, nasty breaker installed, and it would have been just butchered in there and slapped in. I actually think it could have been an air tasker job. I feel like it might have been. But yeah, I just wanted to put this out there in just a random podcast about money, because you need to have a good sit down with your accountant. I have got a tool inside the mentorship which I get guys to use on the very first foundation level, and it just sets their sights straight of the hourly rate they want to earn, what the overheads are going to be in their business. And that means like your van, your rego, your uniforms, paying yourself a proper wage, including like a decent market wage, more of a wage than you would get as an employee, because you're a business owner now, you run a business, you need to charge yourself out at a decent wage. And that is why the iCare, which is for your workers' comp bill, was nearly $6,000, because it reflects off your wage. And I've put it out there to a few electricians. They're like, man, you need to lower down your wage. And I'm like, I don't know about you, but I'm in business to make money as an electrician. I want to go to work and I want to know that I've made good money, that I can then be satisfied with that and be satisfied with running a business, because if I'm not taking a decent wage there and paying the tax, and I don't mind that as long as that's all being covered, I am happy and content with that. And if I've got to pay a high workers' comp because of that, that's just going to have to be factored into my pricing as well. And these are the things, as you add things on, you're going to get hit with taxes here, there and everywhere. And that's what you have to then bump into your hourly rate, work it into that and go from there. But you need to speak to someone that's decent with numbers if you're struggling with this. I can get you set on a basic level to at least set you off on a proper hourly rate that you need to charge. But if you're looking for a numbers whiz or a guru like that, unfortunately, numbers aren't my thing. As I said, I'm just smart enough to charge more money than it costs to run a business and pay tax. It's simple math, and that's what you need to do. Hopefully this helps hopefully this helps one person raise their hourly rate, so the industry raises one person per day. So that's it from me. I'll catch you next week.